by Professor V.M. Charya, Professor at IIT Delhi. Professor Charya's basic training is in experimental material science. Over the last 2 decades, he has worked on ecological sanitation, appropriate housing, design for sustainability, traditional knowledge systems, and joyous leadership. For his innovative pedagogy, Professor Charya was awarded the Teaching Excellence Award by IIT Delhi in 2011. Professor Charya taught and researched at Arizona State University as a Fulbrighter, and he is author of several patents, publications, technical manuals, and design registrations on innovative technologies. Professor Charya serves as chairman of the IIT Delhi's much awarded sanitation startup Ekam Eco Solutions and mentors several startups. I am thankful to Sir for accepting our invitation. One more thing before starting our session, regarding queries and discussions, I request the participants to drop their queries in the chat box. Sir, we invite you to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Director NIT Trichy and to coordinator of this webinar on Gandhian thoughts on sustainability, Dr. Vivek Mohan. I'm really happy to be part of this webinar, which is being organized as part of 150th anniversary celebrations of Father of the Nation. I will try and sort of end this a little bit early so that there can be some time for addressing questions or in engaging in dialogue with the students, because one of the key things about Gandhi was dialogue. He really respected dialogue. He had a great ear. He could really feel what people were experiencing, were going through. So he was a man of tremendous empathy. So when we say Gandhian thoughts on sustainability, so he felt a lot for all the interconnections between the various components in our world, whether it is the living world or the non-living world. There was a very deep sensitivity that he brought to everything that he wrote, that he spoke and he practiced. And there was complete convergence between these three, which is what makes it so powerful. So whether it is Gandhi here in India, or it's Martin Luther King in the US. So there was a lot of synchronicity between their thoughts, their speech and action, which is why they became such great global icons. And it's 150 years and we still have so much to learn from Gandhi, because he was an absolute pathbreaker with respect to sustainability. Even the word sustainability was coined in 1987, and Gandhi, of course, is no more. He passed away in 1948. But if one looks at Gandhi's vision, closely, one finds that he's far ahead of his time. In fact, he is said to have very famously asked an American journalist that when every American will have a car, where will he drive this car to? Because normally one thought that, when you have a carriage, a horse carriage, or a bullock cart or wherever, then you go into the wilderness, to spend some time with yourself, to connect with yourself. But the moment we have, each one of us on the planet has a vehicle, where will we drive it to? Will there be any wilderness left? Will there be any place of quietness left at all? Any serenity left? Any bees or butterflies left? So that was the question, and it was a very deep question, far ahead of his time, that he asked this American journalist who was visiting him and he was traveling with him. Of course, I'm not going to burden with a lot of Gandhi history in this sort of presentation, but I'm going to speak about deep ecology that is embedded in Gandhi's development vision, and I'm going to take up 2 cases. If we have little paucity of time, I may end with 1 case, but I will make the slides available to the coordinators so that this could be circulated to students or anybody else who's interested. So I'm part of the Center for Rural Development and Technology at IIT Delhi. We are a center established in 1970, and we work closely with communities, and we also try to bring a flavor of development into the engineering curriculum for the benefit of our students. One of the missions of our center is to identify problems of the rural sector that require science and technology input, and we try and solve it within the framework of sustainable development. We are continuously, for the last 50 years, developing a sustainable technology base by blending, wherever possible, modern science and technology with traditional knowledge that is available with the people. We are very interdisciplinary in our approach. We collaborate across multiple departments of the institute, and teaching, research, technology dissemination, working closely with voluntary organizations, governments, and village industries for enhancing quality of life in our rural areas is our mandate. I am part of the Green Solutions and Sustainable Habitat Group at IIT Delhi Rural Development Center, and the areas of focus of my work have been green housing and habitat. That is basically using local materials more and more in housing. We call them low embodied energy materials or vernacular materials. They more or less dissolve into the environment after their period of useful life is over. I also work, and I'm very thrilled to share a little bit of my work on ecological sanitation, both products and technologies, which is completely inspired by Gandhi, actually. Because Gandhi, wherever he lived, whether he lived in the Sevagram ashram in Wardha, close to Nagpur, or in the Sabarmati ashram outskirts of Ahmedabad, he was always very sensitive about sanitation. And in fact, there were two missions that he had. One was, of course, an ecological mission that water should not be polluted, and any waste that comes out of human systems is actually soil for fertilizer for the soil, is actually nutrients for agriculture, and actually should be recycled. So he was very far ahead of his time. In fact, today we have people like Bill and Melinda Gates investing into large projects called Reinvent the Toilet. And Gandhi had already reinvented the toilet. He was actually implementing dry toilets wherever he went. He never polluted sanitation systems with excessive amount of water. So that's one area which I work on, which is deeply Gandhian. You know, the footprint on ecological sanitation that Gandhi left is very, very big. And though we do not really acknowledge him for his vision with respect to sanitation, he, I think, is the forerunner of ecological sanitation all over the world. Traditional community knowledge, one other area I work with, and value-added crafts. Of course, all these were close to Gandhi's heart. If you visit any of the places that Gandhi lived in, whether it is Sevagram ashram, then you see his hut. And he famously said that I want the wind to blow into my home. You know, I want my windows to be open. I want ideas to come from everywhere, and I don't want to be closed. So Gandhi stands for that kind of openness and sort of, you know, a non-violent home. So he's all for sort of, you know, technology, but at the same time, he's all for a very kind technology, a compassionate technology, an empathetic technology. And that one can see whether it is in the housing that he advocated or the textiles, which, you know, the charkha became a huge symbol for our political freedom. And it was a moral, ethical, and a political weapon. It was not only a political weapon, but it was a moral, ethical, and political weapon. So Gandhi, you know, had brought so many ideas powerfully into this sort of symbol of the charkha, right? And it was also standing for sustainability and self-reliance and inclusivity. So today, though, the topic of our webinar is sustainability, but charkha was also for inclusivity, for enabling the grandmothers, for enabling the children to be part of the production process, and you know, skilling them, you know, ensuring that people have skills and people use those skills to create beauty, to add beauty into our life and into society. So I have been on a journey, and much of this journey has been with Gandhi. Right from the time I went to IIT Bombay in 1989, and my encounter with the Wildlife Club at IIT Bombay, and the whole issue of ecology and biodiversity and saving the lake, the Powai Lake, which was really, you know, receiving a lot of waste from the city of Mumbai and dying. I then came to IIT Delhi around 91, where faculty and students set up a study group on Gandhi. It was called the Swaraj Study Circle, where we discussed the ideas on politics of development. I spent a lot of time at the Sevagram ashram in Wardha, where we came face to face with farmers' issues in Vidarbha. And Vidarbha, as we will see later in the talk, going through very tough times. The cotton farmers of Vidarbha and the cotton weavers, the handloom weavers of Vidarbha going through very tough times. And I've also traveled across the country in looking at issues of artisans and forest dwellers. And I had a postdoc stint at CSIR where I looked a little more at vernacular knowledge. And I've been teaching at IIT Delhi and doing work on housing, habitat, and sanitation. And in 2013, we took some of these efforts, which are very much inspired by Gandhi. We took the startup route to take some of these innovations to the market. So that's something very interesting that we have done, that we are very proud of ensuring that much of the research that we do in CRDT actually hits the market, reaches people, promotes sustainability in real life. It is not just a patent or a publication that goes into our library. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And the most important thing is, which I picked up from Gandhi, is that I'm still learning with and from my diverse students. So this is one aspect that I cannot emphasize more, that I still feel like a student. I'm learning something new every day. And I feel that there's a lot that I can learn from each of my students. I have over 15 PhD students, and they come from diverse disciplines, and I feel that I can learn something from each one of them. Just to make it a little interesting, I want to share a small poem from somebody who's known as a contemporary Gandhi today. And I would like you all to guess who this person is. But the poem is called The Paradox of Our Age. I hope you enjoy this poem on this sort of, as part of this commemoration of Gandhi. So it says, we have bigger houses, but smaller families. We have more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees sometimes, but less sense. We have more knowledge, but less judgments. More experts, but more problems. We are in the year 2020, and we have so many experts on public health, and look at the issues right now, how complex it is, not only in India, and very, very developed parts of the world. On the east coast of the US and on the west coast of the US. More medicines, but less healthiness. We have been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We build more computers to hold more information, to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. We have become long on quantity, but short on quality. These are times of fast foods, but slow digestion. Tall men, but short character. Steep profits, but shallow relationships. It is a time when there is much in the window, but nothing in the room. So this is, of course, maybe there's a little bit of exaggeration that is used here to convey something, to make us question, to make us relook at various things that we assume are important ingredients in a fast-paced life. And Gandhi has been compelling us to rethink, to question, and to think about the last man or the last woman, Antyodaya, the last person. And there have been many people who have followed that ideal, whether it is Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. I don't know whether you figured out who this poem is by. This poem is by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And he says, be kind whenever possible. And cheekily, very naughtily, as he is naughty, he says, it is always possible. Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. And Gandhi lived his life very much like this. So we are living in this era of tremendous amount of technology, fast-paced life, and we are facing some issues which are there on the left-hand column, right? And sometimes we look at solutions, and the solutions sometimes look to be more dangerous than the original problems themselves or the original challenges themselves. So we have growing energy consumption all over the world, and along with population, of course, but we have tremendous amount of energy requirement that is happening. And the solution that is suggested sometimes is that, we have any amount of energy that we can generate if we only tap into the radioactive materials, into nuclear power. Yeah, and we all know that that along with nuclear power, we are also generating a tremendous amount of hazardous chemical waste. We have excessive water demand all over the world. We are replacing, small, simple ways with which we were using water with very complex ways in which we are using water. And sometimes people tell us a very simple solution that we need to just interlink the rivers, prevent the river water from being discharged into the sea, and that we will have a tremendous amount of water. In fact, very celebrated scientists have done that. And sometimes people do not realize that there is something called a natural flow, that water from the mountains will flow to the plains, and water from the plains into the rivers, and then they need to discharge that water into the oceans and to the seas. And if somebody says that no, the seas do not require their water. So this is the latest in the series of mental blocks that we have developed, that we can sort of obstruct all natural flows. And that goes very much against the concept of sustainability, that we will interlink our rivers. For sanitation and open defecation, sometimes we say that we will build toilets and we will flush all the waste into the nearest water body. And we can see the status of the water bodies all over the country. NIT Trichy is in a high water table area. The river Kaveri is flowing through Trichy. And we know the issues, that when there is a high water table and when there is contamination, when there is sewage that flows into that body, then there are some people, who may have access to an RO system. Some people may have access to a UV filtration system, but others are tapping river water for drinking. And that leads to tremendous amount of diarrhea and dysentery and all kinds of health issues, typhoid and cholera. We seem to think that we have lack of political insight and we can use more technology, more missiles and bombs and nuclear proliferation to solve it. We poison our natural environment and we think that we can use nano and biotechnology to heal it. But it looks as if some of the technologies that we use on the right-hand side, in the right-hand column, and that's why I have purposely highlighted it using a red color, is that they have effects which are probably more challenging than the original issue that we were trying to solve. So that is why I call it reductionist. Sometimes the solutions are very reductionist and therefore completely unsustainable. So we need to move to a framework where our solutions are, time-tested and universal in nature and ecological in nature. So I have a question for all of you, that over the last 4 decades, do we think that we have had a complex challenge facing these issues? Quality of the environment, with respect to health and livelihood, social relationships, and with respect to economy, technology, and politics. I would like you all to reflect on this, and this is a question for all of you, and particularly for the students who are there on this webinar. And is this challenge that we are facing, this complex challenge that we are facing, is it only in the developing world, or is the phenomenon global in nature? Is it only in the developing world, or this complex challenge that we are facing global in nature? And any explanations for it? And sometimes we seem to think that we need to develop more. Yeah, we have not developed enough. And if we develop a little more using the same framework, using the same paradigm, we would solve those problems with respect to the environment, with respect to health, with respect to livelihood, with respect to relationships, and so on. So my question here is the issue, is the challenge underdevelopment, or we need to develop more, or is it with this framework of development that we have adopted, inside which there are consequences of inequity, overconsumption, wastefulness, etc. Yeah. So in response to this, I want to indicate, to come to this theme of this webinar on sustainability and Gandhian thoughts. So inspired by Gandhi, in 1970, all over the world, there was this whole theme called appropriate technology and intermediate technology that came up. It is completely inspired by Gandhian thinking. And there was a great thinker in Europe by name Schumacher, who wrote a beautiful book, and it should be mandatory reading for all engineers. It's called Small is Beautiful. Small is Beautiful. A wonderful book by Schumacher, and he advocated the concept of appropriate technology. There was a crisis in the energy sector, and he was advocating that we must go in for methodologies which are decentralized for energy production. In fact, the advocacy was that we should move away from coal, which was a highly polluting technology, into other technologies. Of course, renewable energy had not happened in such a big way in 1970, but the term appropriate technology was coined, and appropriate technology starts becoming popular in 1970. And that is very much inspired by Gandhi. 1987, of course, we are facing multiple crises. Fossil fuels are being used more and more, and there are pollution-related effects. We now face those effects much more in the cities, respiratory problems induced by suspended particulate matter. But 1987, sustainable development. The word sustainable development gains currency. It is a buzzword, continues to be a buzzword even today. 2010, we faced big challenges of climate change and global warming. One of the elections to the post of president in the US also got dominated by this issue. A beautiful documentary film called An Inconvenient Truth Gets Made by a presidential candidate. 2010, climate change and global warming. And 2020, we are facing an issue with respect to health, right? It doesn't appear to be an issue with respect to environment. It's a health issue, but it is obviously connected to the other issues of environment, social relationships, economy, technology, and politics. So do we need solutions more and more from a technology and economics perspective, which is what we have been doing for the last 50 years in India, for the last 200 years in the rest of the world, with the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, and sometimes using a very reductionist framework of developing solutions? Or do we need a more new and integrated perspective of development? So that's the question that I'm trying to address through this interaction that I'm having with all of you. So just to make a shift to Mahatma Gandhi, and Gandhi never mentioned these words. And if I mention quotes from Gandhi here, I think already people are very bored. They call him Majburi ka naam Mahatma Gandhi already. That we follow Gandhi only when we have no other option, right? Now, for example, Gandhi talks about turning the other cheek. It is a very Christian ideal, a very, very, very non-violent ideal, which he picks up from his deep dialogues with Christianity, which he had when he was in England and South Africa. Turning the other cheek, which is very biblical, which is very Buddhist, which is very Jain in orientation. Yeah. And normally people would ask, why would you turn the other cheek? Yeah, because Gandhi said, an eye for an eye would make everybody in this world blind. Right. So he was such a deep thinker with respect to consequences of our actions, that he understood, not only with respect to violence, but also with respect to the kind of technology that we adopt. So if I were to only summarize 4 values associated with Gandhi's vision of development, with respect to Gandhi's vision of development, then I would find that those 4 words are Samajikta, or respecting the social web, deep respect for the social web, Parasparata, which is understanding complementarity, that we become complete because of each other. Yeah, I am not separate from you. I become complete because of you. Yeah, the farmer, the weaver, the person who's making the local sales in the market, everybody comes together to make a complete system. And finally, Saundarya Drishti, Samriddhi and Saundarya Drishti, that abundance. So abundance is abundance for all. Any abundance where we exclude some 10% of the population in utter poverty can never give us that sense of satisfaction or fulfillment. Only when there is nobody who is going hungry in the family. Yeah, if somebody is even angry and not having food and going to sleep, we feel pain. Nobody else in the family can speak. So Gandhi had this deep empathy because of which he was able to feel the pain of the last woman or the last man, which is why he decided to get out of his barrister's suit and reduced all clothing to only 2 pieces of clothing. And Saundarya Drishti, that is an aesthetics and cultivating an aesthetics of consciousness, understanding and pursuing beauty within our life and outside, not only pursuing beauty outside by going to the most fashionable mall and shopping, but making my heart a very beautiful place where beautiful things always reside. So these were core values that I think are part of Gandhi's vision of development. And of course, sustainability, as I told you, is a term that came much after Gandhi. When Gandhi existed, he was actually practicing sustainable economics, sustainable politics, and sustainable activities related to production. Yeah. But it is meant to be an ideal where we configure our civilization and our activity so that the present generation can meet their needs, that we can express their greatest potential while also preserving biodiversity, natural ecosystems, and maintaining the ability for these ideals to remain with us for a very long term. So this term also has its parallel to the word holism, and Aristotle in the metaphysics says the whole is more than the sum of its parts. But when we have used technology in a non-sustainable framework, sometimes we reduce the whole to its parts, but when we piece it together, we find that there are side effects. And those side effects are very difficult to handle. Yeah, the river quality, the water quality of rivers, or the poverty in certain kinds of frameworks of development that we adopt poses big challenges for us. So here I want to sort of give a possibility which is very Gandhian, which is what we call ecological knowledge. In other places, it's also called traditional knowledge. And such knowledge, which is sustainable and which honors those four principles of Samajikta, Parasparata, Samriddhi and Saundarya Drishti, is invented and tested in the field. So it is not as if I develop something in the lab and then I take it to the land. Then there are lots of pitfalls when I transfer the technology. I find that, there are so many new factors in the field that they create havoc. And to balance all of them, I need to do so much and I create side effects and lots of side effects. So ecological knowledge is invented and tested in the field. All environmental and social interactions, effect on other life forms, known and unknown, are allowed to play their part. And this makes that knowledge holistic and avoids the errors and pitfalls when knowledge is applied on the basis of incomplete or inadequate theories. So this has been a little bit of a weakness of the modern techno-economic paradigm. We develop lots of solutions and they appear to be very elegant and very powerful. They're fast, they give us a lot more, but at the same time, they come with side effects which become very difficult to handle. For example, the sedentary lifestyle that we have adopted. We sit for hours and we develop this pain here. Yeah, we develop the pain in the joints, etc. The cooking, we stand in the kitchen and cook. Women standing in the kitchen and cooking for long hours, and they develop this arthritis and knee pain. So there are many consequences of actions that we sort of do, which we do not realize. So ecological knowledge or holistic knowledge is knowledge that avoids errors and pitfalls, which occur when we apply knowledge on the basis of inadequate or incomplete theories. And in traditional knowledge or ecological knowledge, all problems or anything that you want to address, any challenge that you want to address is understood in the context. It is not separated. It is not taken away into a sterile environment where you solve it and then you try to reintegrate it. Yeah, anything that you solve is solved in a real life context. Granted its diverse linkages to the rest of the world. The solutions are developed in an actual situation and there is no fragmentation of approach. So that is what is a hallmark of a sustainable intervention. Not only a sustainable technology, it may be a socio-economic intervention, it may be a cultural intervention, it may be an educational intervention. The intervention is granting the linkages of that entity into which you want to intervene with the rest of the world. You're not isolating it, sterilizing it and doing it, because it will never remain sterile. It will go back to its environment. So people's knowledge is a hallmark of this. When we say ecological knowledge, people are the holders of that knowledge. And I will tell you a little bit down in the talk who are the sort of holders of this traditional knowledge in India or the ecological knowledge in India. But we find that some of the features of this knowledge, ecological knowledge, which is traditional, held by our vernacular communities, is that it's sustainable and ecologically sound. It uses, the principles are universal, but the context is very local. So for example, this principle of loving thy neighbor or of turning the other cheek is a universal principle. The language in which I may practice it may be different in India, may be different in Pakistan or in Bangladesh or in Burma or Sri Lanka. But this practice of non-violence is a universal principle that all life is interconnected, and you cannot only do violence on one component without violating the whole component. We all know that in our home, that when there is somebody who is unhappy, it may be a child, a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old child is unhappy in our home, the parents cannot have dinner. It is not possible. The child needs to smile. Yeah, otherwise the parents cannot go to sleep. So it is like that. So all life is interconnected. So we need to perceive the pain of every component of the ecosystem. If there is more than a threshold amount of pain in the ecosystem, then that will lead to the whole ecosystem being in pain. And that is what Gandhi was representing. He was able to perceive the pain of the last person. Yeah, he called them the Harijan. He called the people who were lifting the night soil the Harijan, and he said that therefore we cannot have an inhuman technology where somebody has to lift the night soil and take it away. I need to turn my night soil and convert it into manure. So that was the radical level of empathetic, sustainable innovation that Gandhi practiced. So universal principle, local context, using local natural and knowledge resources. Wherever possible, the focus should be, when the director Saab was just speaking a little while ago about Atmanirbhar, about self-reliant, that, so whatever you can draw from your immediate 5, 10, 15 or 20 kilometers, you use your resources from that. Everybody consuming an exotic resource which is coming from 20,000 kilometers away will mean that we are going to add to global warming, to climate change, to wastefulness, etc. So Gandhi believed in being grounded, in being rooted, in being organic and decentralized, and consuming and doing most of your consumption from local sources. And that would lead to energy efficiency. So he was always for encouraging small to medium scale enterprises, because there is a little bit more equitable distribution of wealth when the enterprise is small to medium in scale, and ensuring creative participation, not employment, but ensuring that everybody in every community participates in the process of production and value addition in society. So it is not that you have producers and you have consumers. That is very unsustainable, if you look at, in fact, the indigenous or the tribal societies of India, you find that everybody can sing and everybody can dance and everybody can farm. So nobody is a parasite. Everybody is adding value to the society. So that's the vision of a sustainable society. And there's a life-oriented approach. So the approach is not only with respect to material or with respect to speed or with respect to productivity, but it is with respect to using resources with restraint, naturally focusing on, we don't need a central pollution control board to control our pollution, because the nature of our life is that if I pollute something, it comes back to me. It is not possible that I will pollute my outdoors and I will breathe some oxygen sort of cylinder. That is not possible. It's just not possible. So because of the life-oriented approach, ecological knowledge shows concern for far-reaching consequences and always adopts a cautious and conservation approach in the way it expresses itself. So it's not only an approach with respect to ecology, it's also a community-oriented approach to the ownership of knowledge. The benefits that are derived from utilizing people-centric knowledge is for the community, and so that it remains just and equitable and makes the whole process of research a very creative, vibrant, and living process. So just a summarization between modern reductionist science. We are using a little bit of it for being on this webinar today, but we find that sometimes this approach pains us, begins to trouble us, that the approach of isolating the problem, of optimizing parameters, of achieving some sort of simplicity, but there is an overall larger complexity, tremendous amount of sophistication, but the human being and his or her skill becomes redundant. And then the social and environmental cost being excluded, and saying that we now have a high efficiency, high productivity system. So these are some of the issues because of which we are organizing this webinar. But these things are not acceptable to us. We want to get out of this framework, which leaves us with some solutions and some issues or problems which are much larger. So deep ecological knowledge, as I just told you in the previous slides, which is inspired by Gandhi, or Gandhi was inspired by vernacular knowledge or knowledge of ordinary people, not necessarily only institutional knowledge. And he believed that everybody possesses a certain sort of deep intuitive knowledge which must be respected and harnessed. So that is, which is respecting both the system and the surroundings. Humans and nature are integrated. Solutions are developed in actual situations, and there are no hidden costs. And this, whether we call it the traditional knowledge or ecological knowledge, or I like to call it Lok Vidya, people's knowledge, includes innumerable number of technological skills as well, applied in agriculture with respect to irrigation, iron smelting, pottery, woodwork, sculpture, leatherwork, weaving, dyeing. These are all the older occupations for which we have a wealth of knowledge available with our communities in India. And they use this knowledge in their daily life. It is time tested, handed over from generation to generation. But it is not only knowledge in terms of producing a pot or a carpet or whatever, but it also has ideas about ecology and about the social impact of activities. So if you look at the ecological or social footprint of these activities, it's extremely small and it creates products of tremendous beauty. Yeah. Examples are the Aranmula mirror from Kerala, for example, a beautiful mirror that is made in Aranmula, or the Pochampalli fabrics from Andhra Pradesh. I'm not only talking of the very celebrated arts and crafts, but little known. Every small hamlet or village of India has its own unique knowledge system, which has been where into which Samajikta, Parasparata, Samriddhi and Saundarya Drishti has been interwoven. It is not something that, I need to produce something and then package it to make it beautiful. The whole process of utilizing the raw material, of converting it into a value-added product, of making it culturally beautiful, of making it a beautiful part of my life, right, is beautiful. And all these are contained within a framework which holds together the whole process without any internal contradictions. So who are the bearers of the ecological knowledge and the sustainable knowledge in our society? So the farmers hold, the agricultural communities hold what I call Kisan Vidya, the communities that practice manufacture, and there are hundreds of communities that practice manufacture, whether it is metalwork or woodwork or cloth work or other things. I call it Karigar Vidya. The forest dwelling communities, they process Adivasi Vidya. They have an intimate knowledge of the forest and the interconnections between small things like the microbe and large things like the mammoth. Yeah, they know the interconnections between the microbe and the mammoth. Yeah, they live in harmony out there. They use the resources very frugally, and they are actually protecting and conserving the whole biodiversity. Communities providing health services, and there are traditional sort of communities that provide health services all over the country. We call that now the modern Ayush system. We call it the Ayush system, but that is the Swasthya Vidya. And our grandmothers, because our young mothers are still learning, I like to humorously say, but our grandmothers have a ripened wisdom, or Stri Vidya, or we can call it grandmother's knowledge. Gandhi deeply believed that all this life, between the life of the artisan, the life of the farmer, the life of the forest dweller, and the life of the women, are all interconnected. It is not separated, and it is actually one interconnected life, which is why he was such a great believer in the concept of respecting the ecology, respecting the environment, and taking up small-scale decentralized production systems. Let's take up this very quick case of Vidarbha and look at two components of our modern techno-economic system, the agricultural system, which has become very much with the green revolution, a lot of high yield varieties, a lot of fertilizers and a lot of pesticides, and cotton grown on 5% of India's acreage and uses 55% of pesticides in agriculture. So I think you can imagine what happens to that land. Only 5% of Indian agricultural land uses 55% of Indian pesticides, because there is so much of possibility of pest infestation because we are using non-local varieties of cotton. So non-local varieties are very vulnerable to pest attack. And so we need to use so much of chemicalization. Naturally, when we use so much of chemicalization on the soil, I want to ask you, do you think that our water systems or our food systems are going to be unaffected? Yeah, so it's posing a complex challenge. We think that I am growing the cotton crop, I'm increasing the cotton productivity, but what am I doing? I'm also polluting the groundwater, I'm polluting the food systems, because there is no separation between where cotton is being grown and where oranges are being grown. And I am happily consuming the orange from Nagpur, and I do not know 10, 15, 20 years later, I am admitted at Tata Memorial Center in Mumbai because there was tremendous amount of pesticide that was used on cotton farms. And I think I'm insulated, I'm separated. Yeah. So we need to understand that all life is interconnected. But let's only look now at the agrarian crisis and the artisanal crisis. Tremendous amount of pesticide in agriculture makes agriculture expensive. And there is a linkage to the cotton that is produced goes to the artisan through these series of steps, right? Cotton gets cultivated, cotton flower, and then you separate the seed from the flower through a process called ginning. And then after that, you can actually convert that into parallel fibers, which can then be spun into yarn of various different counts, because the sari and the dhoti require finer yarn, but the carpets and the bed sheets require thicker yarn. But yarn is spun onto spindles, and then the yarn is processed, sized and dyed and so on, and woven. So we can see that there are 4 stages, if I say broadly. Of course, there are many more stages in textile, but just to understand from a simple perspective, 4 stages of production. The cotton is getting value added in terms of price. The fabric is more expensive, obviously, than the cotton, because there is more value addition that is being done. But we see at a certain component, if you look at row 2, which is yarn spinning, then the typical spinning segment, the size is much, much higher than the typical farm size and the typical yarn processing unit and the weaving unit. And this creates a great unsustainability in the whole textile ecosystem in India. The crisis that we see in the textile ecosystem in India, is because of this one segment of yarn spinning, which has become highly centralized, much more 100 times. In fact, it is much more. I've given a smaller figure here. So typically we have a very absurd situation in India where cotton from Punjab comes to Coimbatore, close to NIT Trichy, comes to Coimbatore for spinning, and then the yarn may go to Bengal for weaving. So one can see the tremendous amount of distances which raw material travels, which is energy inefficient, which increases the number of middlemen involved in the process, and which therefore makes the whole techno-economic system very unsustainable. Yeah, so this was one example I wanted to give about how an irrational techno-economic system, which is because we want to make agriculture efficient and spinning efficient and weaving efficient, but we have not thought about the interlinkages between agriculture and spinning and weaving. And because we have ignored these interconnections, we find that Indian cotton farming is in a crisis and weavers are in a crisis. Every year we hear from Vidarbha that so many farmers and so many weavers committed suicide because the spinning has been taken out. Spinning is in Mumbai and spinning now is in Coimbatore. So you can imagine the local weaver does not get the yarn to spin easily. He has to wait, and it becomes much more expensive and creates very, very big nightmare. So it's a whole supply chain disruption in which both producers, farmer and weaver, both producers, very badly affected. So this is, of course, a little bit of detail, but I would like you to also see a technology. So I'm not only talking about the problem without talking about the solution here. So on the left, you see what is called conventional spinning, which is very centralized and which was developed because the Britishers wanted very cost-effective raw material, which they could use in Lancashire and Manchester. That is why cotton baling and centralized cotton spinning. But now we have, over the last 10 years, an amazing experiment called micro spinning. So do visit this website called microspin.in, which is an IIT Madras alumnus-inspired initiative of an amazing technology that sits between the cotton farmer and the cotton weaver to ensure that the cotton farmer gets a very good return and the person who's weaving gets access to raw materials so that he can sort of weave the amazing materials without them become prohibitively expensive. Also look at buldanaurban.in, which is an end-to-end integrated industry which takes in cotton and comes out with garments, again working in Vidarbha. And both these people are working in collaboration. Sukesh Zamwar from Buldana Urban, along with N. L. Kannan, who is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Madras. So technology and sustainable technology and a sustainable techno-economic system has been demonstrated in the textile and in the agrarian sector. So do take a look at this example as an illustration of Gandhian in spirit sort of innovation in modern times. The other issue that I want to speak about is very close to my heart. I'm sure you all live near a water body, and this picture is hardly shown to any of the tourists whom we want to welcome to India. But this is a sad fact that 80% of India's sewage flows untreated into water bodies, mostly into rivers. And whenever we are using the train or whenever we are crossing a bridge to enter a new city, we find that there is a big stench. And very often to take our children to a water body, we need to take great pains to show them that water is actually blue. It is a great effort. And this is a public health issue. This is a public health issue because animals use water from lakes and ponds and rivers. a lot of people are dependent on water from these water bodies without using an RO system or other kind of systems. So in the context of water and sanitation sustainability, we need to look at various stakeholders. So it is not only the water department or the sanitation department that is responsible for ensuring a sustainable water system, but everybody, including a person who's planning a city, and artists and social scientists and economists are all sort of, stakeholders in ensuring a sustainable ecosystem. We have grown towards, over the last 100 years or 200 years all over the world, a very consumptive ecosystem where we believe in extracting a large number of resources and manufacturing and distributing and consuming and not worrying about where the waste is going. And this is happening in every major urban center in India and in many parts of the world. This is a linear consumption, production, consumption, disposal system, and this is very, very unsustainable for our urban spaces. And this is already very outdated. And probably these solutions, which we think are technologies, landfill as a technology or incinerator as a technology, is it at all a technology option? One needs to really deeply reflect on this question. Is it a sensible option at all for us? Probably not, because it pollutes the groundwater or it pollutes the air, and it comes back and hits us in the form of either a water crisis and gastrointestinal infections or respiratory infections, right? So when we look at issue of health of water bodies, Gandhi would have compelled us to ask these questions. How much energy do we really need? Because many rivers, we are tapping hydroelectricity from rivers by obstructing river flow. But we need to ask the question, how much energy do we really need as a society? Then what should be the mechanism of energy generation? Is natural flow of rivers important? Should water naturally flow in drains or not? Or should they be carrying the city's waste? And what is the role of cycles of carbon, nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, and how do water bodies promote that? So Gandhi had a very deep understanding of the circularity of life, of that things need to flow, that things cannot be very linear, as I had shown in that previous slide on production, consumption, and disposal. So we need a closed loop approach where we respect both organic and inorganic flows. And we need to look at that with respect to agriculture. We need to look at it for improving our health, and we need to look at that for improving sustainability. So slowly in the water and sanitation space, we need to move towards what I call zero waste systems, where there's a combination of responsible policy, clean manufacturing, zero waste community programs, every single person an empowered recycler, and then recovery infrastructure so that we can recycle all those nutrients into useful products into our ecosystem. And probably we would come to realize, which is, I asked this question, that the whole thing called a category called waste is a product of bad design. Bad design of cities, bad design of economic policies, bad design of industrial policy and production policy. Otherwise, in nature, if you go into nature, into a forest or into any water body, is it possible for you to find anything called waste in nature? That this is waste. In nature, very, very difficult to find. In nature, there is no such thing called waste. So we need to develop nature-inspired, bio-inspired systems where we are completely zero waste and we are only creating beauty, right? So what appears to be waste is also, an input into another ecosystem. So we need a radical shift in our national cleanliness drives. We have big programs and we are very busy right now, constructing a lot of urinals and a lot of toilets and installing garbage bins. But does it call for something much deeper and much more fundamental? Does it call for a deeper question? And there are, the silver lining is that, there are amazing people. Like I showed you one success story from agriculture and textiles. I want to also flash here. People like Ravi Agarwal of Toxic Slings and C. Srinivasan of the Indian Green Service, Almitra Patel of the Intact Water Network, Saru Wagmare, a Recyclers Network, doing amazing work on clean and green habitat. In sanitation also, though we are yet to really break out of the very difficult situation that we are in, we are seeing a large number of startups in sanitation and waste management. One of them, Ecom Eco Solutions, is from IIT Delhi. And some of our PhD research that I began with my students in 2005, we translated to market in around 2013, and now we are 7 years in the market, and we are promoting products which leads to water conservation and recycling of nutrients in the ecosystem. So Gandhi would have loved this slide if he were here today, that 700 million rural people, their pee and poo is 350 million tons of organic fertilizer each year. Currently, we are flushing it down the Yamuna and the Kaveri, and the economic worth of that is $1.8 billion US. Global human waste is estimated to be 8.5 million tons each day, and its economic worth annually is $20 billion US in terms of nitrate, phosphate, and potassium. So is it waste, is my question. So Gandhi would have looked at it as a resource. So we looked at this freshwater crisis that we have all over India, and in 2013 we launched this startup called Ecom Eco Solutions with a mission of promoting natural abundance of water on the planet through waterless urinal. Intervention called a waterless urinal. That urine anyway flows through the ceramic pot. One doesn't need to flush 50 ml of urine with 25 liters of water. That is what we have been doing because we do not value water deeply. We do not understand the value of fresh water. We are so privileged, people of privilege. We do not understand. If you look at people in the slums or people living under the poverty line, they understand the value of water much more than we do. So we need to become far more conscious with respect to how we use our resources. And this is an innovation. You may like to visit the website ecomeco.com, and you'll find a large number of products. This was our first product which we launched in 2013. Now we have come up with a range of products you can take a look at. We're also looking at urine harvesting. That urine is a source of nitrate and phosphate and potassium, and it can actually be harvested. Some of those experiments are happening around Trichy in the town of Musiri as well. And urine being taken into banana farms, and urine as fertilizer is also being used in many parts of the world, including in certain parts of Tamil Nadu. So some questions that I would like to pose, that is it only more and more technology and more products that will make the world a more beautiful and harmonious place? Gandhi would have asked these questions. Is making the world more beautiful and harmonious only because of more and more technology? Or do we need more and more to embrace the paradigm of frugal engineering? And is sustainable consumption the only way forward for us in the years to come, considering that we are being taken over, the human habitat is being taken over by the amount of mountains of waste that we are generating? So some key thoughts to create more aesthetic habitat. Gandhi was always focused on aesthetics, that we need to understand the carrying capacity of our ecosystem. We need to respect communities and their need for decentralization, understand human settlement issues, plan our human settlements in such a way that aesthetics can be promoted, separate a lot of things that are apparently not useful at source, metal and paper and glass and organic and other things. The more we are able to separate that at source, the more they become resources, the more they all get mixed up, the more it all becomes a deadly cocktail of waste. We need to focus on landscape as well as on drainage. We need to promote drainage. Speaking about interlinking of rivers seems to be dangerous ideas. Not allowing a river to drain into the sea is going to have a lot of repercussions on other components of the ecosystem. We need to embrace frameworks of frugal engineering, biomimics, and closed loop systems to develop a consciousness of the aesthetic. So this kind of interventions can be made in variety of areas, whether it is with agriculture or livestock, seed, diversity, rejuvenating traditional micro watersheds, promoting local health and nutrition regime, realigning the raw material and their availability for producers, supporting local market, and going for local material-based housing. These are some ways in which we can look at different sectors and come up with sustainable interventions in moving from the linear approach of production and consumption to a more circular approach. I've shown this slide for sanitation, but this is applicable for many different components of our society and economy. And finally, I would like to end with Gandhi's quote, and he says, "I believe it to be perfectly possible for an individual to adopt the way of life of the future without having to wait for others to do so." Thank you so much. It was lovely